Well, obviously, I love coffee, and it's true. I really love coffee. So I was having, in fact, before I came here this morning, a coffee with a friend and a colleague just to relax a bit and to exchange about what I was going to tell you today. And then I realized that my friend, in fact, was very nervous, looked very stressed, a bit sad. And I asked him, but what's wrong with you? I'm the one who's speaking today. I mean, I will have to address a large audience. So what's wrong with you? And then he told me, how can we hear speaking about climate change and drinking coffee? I mean, coffee has got such a significant carbon footprint. These coffee beans probably were planted in some tropical country. Maybe they resulted in the change of land use and the destruction of tropical forests. Then the coffee had to be harvested. Maybe they use industrial harvesting techniques that are really bad for the environment. And then they had to transport it by air or by plane, which is also polluting. And then it arrived here, and it had to be processed, repackaged, and delivered. And then I stopped my friend. I said, listen, stop. And the reason why I stopped him is first, because I wanted to finish my coffee quietly and to relax before coming here to see you. And then the second reason is because I do not think that we need, all of us, to plunge into despair, helplessness, or even guilt every time that we think about climate change. And please, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that individual behavior is not important. It is. And I'm not saying that personal ecological awareness is not relevant. In fact, it is massively relevant. And at some point, we all need to change our own behavior to take into account the climate crisis. But I also believe very deeply that we need to focus also on the big picture. We need to focus on the collective and the structural actions and remedies that we are implementing. And so that's why I came here today to give you a European perspective. I will speak only about what we do in Europe, in the European Union, to address the climate change. So you can understand what is the state of mind, not very far from you, on the other side of the sea, in Europe. And don't take this as a lesson or as a preach or us bragging the Europeans we're doing things better. It's not. It is really a clear-eyed explanation about how things and what is our mindset on the other side of the sea. Because in fact, in Europe, we have a plan. We have adopted a plan to face the consequences of climate change. And we call that the European Green Deal. And the European Green Deal is a structural and collective plan to turn our economy into a fair, clean, and just model for economic growth that will allow future generations still to meet their needs and to have great life. So this is the European Green Deal. And of course, it implies the most dramatic industrial, political, economic, and trade revolution that we have seen in generations. So we have decided in a meaningful, measurable, and binding manner to change the way in which we do business, to change the way in which we produce and consume services and goods, in which we move, the means of transport, in which we live, the way we build infrastructure, buildings, houses, the way in which we grow agricultural products. So it's a very, very wide and comprehensive plan. And in order to make it credible, meaningful, and in order to monitor the implementation of the plan, we have set a number of very concrete, binding, and measurable objectives. The most important of it, and it's very concrete, is that by 2050, the European economy must turn into a fully carbon-free economy. So by 2050, Europe must be the first continent where the economy doesn't emit any carbon at all. So this is a very concrete challenge, a very concrete objective, and it is 25 years away. So that is, it is in the lifespan of everybody in this room, even me. So we will see it, and we will be able to see how things are evolving in Europe. But in order to make sure that this is happening, there's also a wide range of other clear, binding, and measurable objectives. Many of those are for the next few years, and there's a progression, a step-by-step approach in the way in which we want to implement this plan. For instance, in 2030, we want to eliminate by 55% in comparison to 1990, this is how we measure things, the total carbon emissions that the European economy is generating. So we're in 2024. Basically, we have a bit more than 5 years to reach that objective. Very clear, very measurable, and we're on track of that. We are today at almost 33% of reduction of emissions, and the goal is 55% in 5 years. And the first paradigm shift, this change of mental framework for economic growth, is that it is possible to decouple economic growth and prosperity from carbon emissions, from contamination. It is possible to generate economic growth and at the same time, at the same moment, reduce carbon emissions. So work in favor of climate change, reducing climate change. In Europe, we have proven that already. Since we started measuring in the last decades, since 1990, in fact, the European economy has grown by 70%. If you compare 1990 to today, 2024. During the exact period of time, the carbon emission reduction was 32.3%. So you have a case there for increase in prosperity, increase in economic development, coupled at the same time with the reduction of emissions. And we're not the only ones. I mean, also in the US, in some Asian countries, we can see the same thing. And other economies as well have managed to do that. In the European Union, we have a legally binding commitment to continue with this process. This includes, of course, in order to achieve this, the introduction of renewable energies to a very large extent. This includes the elimination of polluting means of transport, the transformation of many different sectors. And there are many, many landmarks and many, many concrete objectives along the line to make sure that this paradigm shift can be really implemented. For instance, another landmark, another key objective of the European Green Deal is that by 2035 in Europe, we will ban all pipe-emitting vehicles, all vehicles with internal combustion engines. Maybe, even today, maybe you made the experience. I mean, I don't know if anybody came by car here. I mean, I have to confess that I did. I came by car on my own. And maybe you were at some point stuck in a traffic light with your car stopped, and then you could see the fumes coming out of different cars. Or maybe this morning you were walking around the center of town and you can smell those fumes as well, and you can hear the noise. Well, in Europe, by 2035, that is in 10 years, this will be a distant memory. There's a legally binding commitment to ban that and to stop that kind of process. So this paradigm shift, that the reduction of emissions can be decoupled from growth, is a reality and is one of the key drivers of the European economy today. A second paradigm shift, also very important, is that we can decouple economic growth from the use of raw materials and of primary materials, like minerals, also fossil fuels. And that's why in Europe, we consider that economic growth can be carried out using less and less fossil fuels and more renewable energy, but also through the introduction of the concept of circularity into the industrial processes. Circularity means that you can reuse, recycle, and reintroduce again into the industrial cycle primary materials that were already extracted once. I mean, an example, I can give you one, and you all have it, for instance, If I ask you, what is this? Some of you might say it's a phone. Well, it's not. In the context of what I'm saying, this is a gold mine, this is a zinc mine, this is a cobalt mine, this is a lithium mine, because all these minerals are contained in this phone. About 30 to 40 minerals are contained in all the phones that I see in this room. And the same is valid for all the phones that are all over the world. And all the phones that we all have, all the old phones that we all have in our drawers, that we don't use anymore, that have been there for months or years, and that have not been reutilized. The same is valid for the computers, for cars, for washing machines, TV set. All that is full of material that was once extracted. And in Europe, we are proving that it is possible to use that as well to reintroduce into the industrial process, and that this can generate economic growth. You don't need to go all the time to extract continuously from the planet in order to provide economic growth and prosperity. And that's a change of paradigm, because this is not the conventional economic wisdom. A third paradigm, which is also very important, critical, fundamental, it is the new paradigm of investment in the green economy. Today, let's face it, it's clear that most of the returns and the benefits that you can make are still in very carbon-intensive sectors, whether it is industry, energy, fossil fuels, and others. This is where there is a lot of money to be made. That's the reality. But the new change of the investment mentality will give us the chance to redirect investment towards clean tech, towards clean energy, towards clean industrial sectors, while at the same time taking into account that this investment is also made with a promise of a better future. And that this investment is also made with the understanding that, in fact, if we don't invest today, the costs in the future will be much higher. But this is sometimes difficult, of course, to understand, because when you invest today, you want to return immediately. And it's not always easy to accept that the return will come at a later stage. So there's a change of paradigm, and in Europe, we are already conducting that change, because we are redirecting massive amounts of investment to clean technology, to clean production, and to ecological industrial development. We are investing between 200 and 300 billion euro every year on this type of new projects. And you know what? It's not even enough. There's a very recent report that came out from a very knowledgeable and famous European politician, Mario Draghi, who was a former Prime Minister of Italy, who says that, in fact, the real need for the decarbonization of the European economy to meet all these objectives are close to 800 billion a year. And we're investing a lot less than that. So there is a massive gap, and this is also a key objective of the European Green Deal. And then the last paradigm change, which is also very important, is that all this economic transformation, this evolution, this investment, the reform of industrial processes, in fact, is not led necessarily by industrialists, by businessmen, by the private sector. It is political. Let's face it. This is the reality. It is political. Embarking into a Green Deal like the one we have adopted in Europe is a political choice. There are other choices. You can ignore climate change. Some politicians take that option. You can decide that, okay, you'll think about it later, while acknowledging. But at the end of the day, there must be a political decision to embark into this transformation process. Because remember that we are not saving the planet. I know that this sounds shocking, but the planet is going to survive, even if we self-destruct ourselves. If we end up making the conditions in the planet unlivable, probably not for us, but for future generations, okay, the planet will survive. This planet has spent millions and millions of years without human presence. The planet will survive, not us maybe, and not future generations. So in order to take the cost and the transformation that is needed today for the benefit of a better life today, but also for future generations, this is a political decision. because you have to reallocate resources. You have to eliminate bad incentives, bad subsidies that generate, perpetuate the type of economic development that is negative for the environment. So those are political decisions. That is why in Europe, this is basically the center of the political debate. In any election, whether it is at regional level, national level, or even European level, whether it is in Spain, in France, in Germany, in Belgium, in Italy, in Greece, in Finland, the issue of climate change is always very, very present. And there are forces that defend adaptations, others that do not want to do it, others that want to delay it. And it's not only in Europe, it happens also, as you know very well, in other countries. So this is a very important aspect, that this change will have to take, provided that there is a real political decision. Even at the international level, there's a multilateral system where this is debated between nations. We have now the COP29, where countries are meeting, they're finalizing the meeting on climate change, and this is done on a regular basis. And there is, of course, a political debate between countries within the multilateral system. So this is a decision that has to be taken by societies, by countries. It is not going to flow naturally. Of course, there's a very, very strong scientific case. We know that. But nobody is going to take the reforms that are needed, the sacrifices, the cost, and everything which is involved just because there is a scientific report, even if it's true. Because the science is solid. There's a lot of misinformation there, but the science is completely solid. Okay, so these are the paradigms shifts that are taking place in Europe. I hope that some of them can be inspiring, can help you to think about and to reflect. The good news is that you can still finish your coffee. You can sit back, relax, and even think about the next cup of coffee. Okay, maybe you should try to make sure that it is certified and fair trade coffee, because individual behavior also matters, even if it's going to cost you a bit more. But you relax, sit back, think about what we spoke, and plan your next action, because you can also influence what's going to happen in this area. And remember, the future is not something that you wait for. The future is something that you can create. So let's create this future together. Thank you very much for your attention.